Hi everyone, and welcome to the first in our series of Driving Insights. And today we're going to focus on the evolution of data. But before we do that, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everybody who's contacted, has shared this link, and has joined us today. And also those people joining us watching this back at a later time. It's been great to have so many positive comments of encouragement and support for this series that we're about to embark on. And I really hope that you're able to join me for the follow-on sessions, for which we have some really exciting topics to discuss. But without further ado, let's get into the first session of this series. What I wanted to cover before we get into some of the detail around how we use data within the organization and how businesses have evolved to use data and insights over time is what this series, you can expect from this series and what not to expect. So this really is me talking about the use of data from a decision-making perspective, from a business user's viewpoint, how we use data to make decisions, to run teams, to drive performance in organizations. And I really want to invite people onto this series who are currently maybe using data, thinking about how they might be able to get more from their data and their insights. And also people maybe who've been resistant to taking data into their organization and into their teams and their organizations. What this won't be about is a deep technical explanation about how to build insights or anything around technology and the collection, storage, management of data. We will touch on in some of our later series around some of the behavioral characteristics of data, some of how people will feel threatened by measurement and data. And we'll take the time to also just reflect on how we use data within our own business. In our second of this series of LinkedIn Lives, we'll talk about us as a real data and insights obsessed parking business, and actually how through the data that we capture, the enrichment of the information that we can add, we can really start to bring a completely different perspective to parking. One thing I will guarantee you though, this whole series will not be focusing on parking. And I'd like to make this accessible to lots of people in lots of different industries to hopefully maybe people think differently about how they can embrace and use insights in their roles. So to get us going, I just wanted to talk through how data has really evolved into insights over time and how that evolution has really helped transform businesses. If we think back, many years ago and think about organizations, many organizations were very data resistant, concerned about capturing data, storing data, retaining data. And I think we've seen a real maturity of recently about the value that data can bring. And if managed and controlled, stored and looked after in the right ways, actually how that can add real value. And we'll talk you through in one of our following sessions about how we use that data within our business to help drive the service that we deliver and also drive the performance of our business moving forward. And that's been a really important part of what we do. So organizations historically have been quite resistant. They've become more aware of the value and the power of data can bring. And what we've seen particularly recently is organizations being guided by data and actually allowing data to be a core part of their decision-making process. And that's been a really important part of this evolution. What we see right now are organizations which we class as much more data savvy, using data and insights to really help their decision making, really help define their strategy, really help them understand about the decisions that they should take and the route that they should move forward. And as we move even further forward, we expect to see more and more organizations being data driven and really at the heart of everything that they do, relying on their data, on their insights to really help drive their business forward. I talk to the team and we talk regular about how that data helps us, and it helps us in three ways. Our historical data and data that we record really gives us the benefit of hindsight. Understanding about what happened historically can really help us move forward. Insights are all about telling us what's happening today, how we can make a change or an intervention or a decision today that will help improve something moving forward. And moving into more advanced kind of data insights really starts to give that foresight, that predictive ability about what might happen in the future against a set of scenarios, and how we can run data to run different models and different scenarios to help us with that foresight. And that combination of hindsight, insight, and foresight is really where we now see those data savvy and those data driven organizations moving. What's particularly fascinating actually is the extent to which insights are now used in our everyday world. We'll all be used to those products which are now being delivered to us, those tailored products against our individual needs and our individual requirements, and real focus from a marketing perspective about how we're pushing tailored products to individuals. How it's used in retail, how the organizations are using your loyalty schemes to understand your product's purchasing behavior, and how through that engagement, they'll push other similar products to you for purchasing. I was recently looking on one of my banking apps, and there's a new insights tab now appeared within my app, which tells me depressingly all of the money I've spent, who I've spent the most money with, and how my trend of spending behavior this month has been different to last month. And it's really interesting now just how inbuilt data and insights is into our everyday worlds. And what I want to move on to is just thinking about how you, maybe if you're in running a team, can start to really use data and embed insights into your team to drive us forward. Before we do that, I just want to be really clear on a number of terms. We'll talk consistently through this series about data, management information, insights. I think it's really important just to baseline my definition of those points. So what do we mean by data? Well, data for me is that raw facts, those figures which don't make any sense on their own. They don't have any meaning or purpose individually. When we bring our data together and we start to measure typically a process or an outcome, that's really what we'd class as management information. And lots of organizations will be used to collecting data, building reports, and having static reports available through management information systems. Insights is really where we then create that real deep understanding about what's happening, where we enrich the data that we've collected, where we join different pieces of management information together and really provide the people looking at that insight with a real deep understanding about what's happening. In our world and in our organization, we only deliver actionable data insights. And what I mean by that is an insight and a representation of data which causes you to take action. We can get lost at times in reviewing huge amounts of data, which takes us to no different outcome. And for me, it's incredibly important to focus on actionable data insights. So how do you start the process of becoming more insight-led? Well, for me, the fundamental part of this process is really understanding what really matters to you individually, to your team, to your organization, and focus on measuring those really important outcomes that affect you as a business. The second most important thing for me is to really explain why it's important to the people around you, to your team and your peers, about why this measurement affects your business, and really connect this data to the outcomes of what you're trying to achieve. Again, in our organization, we'll be very focused on collecting measurements and insights to our organizational objectives and outcomes, and really allowing people to feel connected to how we measure performance, how we measure progress as a core deliverable against one of our outcomes as a business. Data can be very threatening. Measurements can be very threatening, but it also, if done right, can be incredibly empowering, and people feeling part of that journey and part of that success that you're achieving. And we'll talk shortly about the kind of pitfalls to be wary of and how best to manage and implement that data-led insights into your organization. Part of what's really important for me, particularly if you're starting out on the journey of wanting to be more insight-led as an individual or as a team, is to keep it simple. To think about what are the 2 or 3 levers that you have in an organization or within your team that really make a difference. What's really also important is to be consistent on your measurements. So to create a baseline of how you measure what's important, to share that information with people around you, and to be really clear about what influences that change. But above everything, keep your measurements simple, keep them very focused, and make sure your team are engaged. We measure probably in excess of 300 to 400 individual insights across our business. But the reality for me, leading Agena as I do, is there's probably 4 or 5 levers that have a real material effect on the success of the service that we provide and the efficiency of our business. And that's what I'm really focused on. Those measures, which for me are the most important, keeping that measurement simple, keeping that measurement consistent. So what are the main benefits of using insights within your business or within your team? The most important focus for me is consistency of conversation. That repetitive focus on a daily, weekly, monthly basis of those measurements we talked about earlier, which are critically linked to your success as an organization. To not be distracted by other factors, to not start to measure aspects of your business or your team which isn't as relevant, and to really focus your conversation on those small number of measures. It's also that ability to take a meaningful snapshot of performance, to very quickly have a window into your business and your team of how you're performing against the things that really matter. We've built a dashboard for our organization, and sadly, I'd have to admit the very first thing I do, typically over breakfast, will be to look at the dashboard. And it really helps me for that day to understand, are we performing as we expected against our 3 or 4 really core measures? Or is there something I need to do today to intervene and take action? And that for me just sets my day, sets the tone of how my day unfolds. And having the ability to take that snapshot on performance for me has been really important to how we run the organization. What's also important is for people to have that sense of ownership, a real understanding of how this measure affects your business and who is accountable for that measure, who is accountable for delivering change and improvements, and what is your expectation over time of how you'd like to see that performance change and improve. A huge benefit around using insights in your business is to remove emotion and opinion from decision making. When you've built your insights, when you've reported over time, and you have that consistency of understanding around performance, there is no other conversation that matters. Individuals can have opinions. There can be other factors which are affecting your performance, but the data will always tell you the truth. The data needs to be your single source of fact when making decisions. We'll talk later about not every decision just being an analytical one and the dangers of just using the data. But what's particularly important is that everybody is aligned to the same underlying piece of data. Everyone has access to the same report, and everyone can see how that's changing over time. What's also important is that those insights can really give you some compelling evidence, really help you in the storytelling of how you're delivering a service to a client, and talk about your overall trajectory. We operate in a business where we're massively affected by seasonality. We're massively affected by changes in society around hybrid working, which has put huge amounts of pressure on the residential portfolio of sites that we look after. How retail has adapted and changed, and that data tells us such an interesting story. And it also allows us to evidence and show to our clients how we're transforming service over time. By sharing with them that data over time, everyone can see the improvements that we're making. And it really has become a fundamental part of the conversation, the engagement we have with our clients. Looking internally as well, where we set ourselves targets for improvements, whether that be efficiencies in how we deliver, whether that be growing the number of car parks that we manage or growing the assets that we're looking after. Using that data to show that growth and using that data and that insights to celebrate success has been incredibly important. So I think in summary to this question, for me, what's particularly, the main benefits of using insights: consistency, the repetitive nature of measurement, and that ability to remove emotion and opinion from decision making, for me, would be what stand out as the most important parts of embedding insights within your organization. So let's move on to talk about how you embed a data culture within your business. For me, it goes right back to the start of this session, and it really is about centering on what's important for your business and taking that time to explain why. For us, having insights connected to our objectives, connecting to our goals and ambitions as an organization is really important. And explaining to everybody involved in that process the connections between those and why our measurements of a particular part of our business is so critical to the delivery of that objective, which underpins those outcomes and our ambitions as an organization. And it really helps it make it relevant to everybody. For your whole organization to embrace a data culture, to embrace insights as part of their role, it has to be relevant to every individual. Every individual needs to see that as something meaningful to spend their time reviewing each day. I'm an absolute believer in what gets measured gets managed. And for me, what's important is to only measure those things that are really, really critical to your organization. As part of setting those insights, defining those objectives, creating those outcomes, you also have to set expectation of what good looks like. What looks good today, and a baseline of what you might deem as acceptable, but also your aspiration for improvement moving forward. And to really set a trajectory looking forward for your team of what you're looking for and what you're looking to expect from them as we move forward. And setting really those kind of signposts going forward about progress. The most important factor for me is to celebrate that progress as you progress, to hit those milestones that you've set your teams, to create some real energy around celebrating that progress that you've made and achieving that first milestone on your plan, using the insights to show the progress that you've made over time, using the insights to display and to give some real engaging content to your teams, that you've now achieved the first of 5 steps that you've set as an organization. But also to learn from those setbacks, where we set our goals and our expectations and maybe we haven't achieved them, is to really understand why. So not to do that in a critical way, to do that in a positive and a learning sense, to say, what can we try different? We've set ourselves many goals. We've tried many different things. They don't always work. But what's important is that we learn from that and we find a new way forward to reach that next milestone on our plan. It's also important to be open to adjusting how you measure moving forward. As more data becomes available, as you enrich your insights with additional information that's available, always making sure that your measurement is accurate. Now, one thing to be cautious of, and one of the pitfalls I mentioned earlier, is that change of measurements over time. Adjusting that consistent way that you're measuring performance is really important. Your insights also should be the basis of your mechanism for discussion. Your team meetings, your board meetings, your client discussions should really embed those insights into that conversation. To start your meetings talking about how are we performing this month, this week, against your 4 or 5 critical measures. And that consistent use of those same measurements really starts everybody to feel embedded as part of that process. We often separate out our team meetings and our engagement with our clients from those measurements and those analytical things that we have in place today. And for me, it's just really important that every conversation you have, you're embedding those insights into that discussion. My other encouragement is to look about the cause and effect that you have. So if you've set yourself a target to drive, for example, a 10% cost reduction in your business of how you're delivering a service, is to have a very conscious set of actions that you take to allow time to measure the effect that they've had and to understand whether that's moving you further forward or further away from your target, and to really control the implementation of change. So your insights can allow you to measure the cause and the effect that change has had. We'll talk in one of our later sessions that we have planned with our operational teams and both our chief operating officer and also our data scientist around the real importance of managing and setting up those control groups and allowing you to accurately measure that cause and effect. As we introduce change to the business, it's just as important we can understand the effect that it has. And as we said before, we want to remove the emotion and the opinion from our insights and our reporting. We also want to do that around change. What does the data tell us? What is our insight telling us that this change has done to our business? And that control of that implementation of that change is really important. And that's a conversation, a topic we'll get to in the third episode of this series of Driving Insights. The last thing for me is really to create that 360 view and the value from your insights, and really how you connect your team to your business and your organizational goals, to the service that you deliver to your clients. And if you can create an organization where every individual understands the role they play, they understand how their contribution and your business is measuring performance through the insights that you deliver, and that translates directly into the service and how you present that to your clients, that for me is the ultimate ambition we have for embedding a data culture, where everybody in that cycle, from employee, organization, client, is connected on the same conversation. We're measuring the same performance, and we use that insights as the basis of all of our conversations. That for me is an ambition we're still searching for. We are well progressed down that route. But for me, it's a constant desire to have more and more people think wider about our insights, the value that it can bring, and how we use that to transform our service. And how our insights actually are the main topic of conversation in everything that we do. So that was really how I wanted to kind of wrap up this first session, to talk about how data and insights can really help you transform your business. What I'll touch on briefly now just is about how this series of Driving Insights is likely to unfold and what to expect from some of the topics in the follow-up sessions. We plan to run a number of these series on a fortnightly basis, and we'd love for you to join us on as many of those as we can, and as many of those that you feel are kind of relevant to the role that you're fulfilling. Moving forward, we will be bringing some additional guests onto this topic. We'll be looking from a behavioral science perspective as how data and insights can help transform teams and service. We'll be looking from a data science perspective about how to manage effectively insights and how to enrich the data that you capture to give you a wider perspective of how your service is being delivered. We'll also look into it from an investor and a non-exec director about the value of insights from an external perspective when supporting a business and people in decision-making processes. And one other area I'm very passionate about is how we use data to manage our people life cycle, how we can use data within our organization to help with staff retention, to help with people realizing their potential, and to really help that drive our recruitment cycles going forward. I'm really excited actually to talk about data within that people context, because I think it's one area which we use incredibly well from a hindsight point of view. A great example would be when we're carrying out exit interviews and we look at what proportion of people have left our business, for what reasons. And we look historically about why people might have left through, in different organizations, through a lack of opportunity or have left because of pay reviews. What we've started to do within Agena, and one of our insights now, is carry out stay interviews and talk to those people who've stayed with the business about what's kept them here. And that's really from a people perspective, which we'll capture later, that change from using data and insights from hindsight to now really making actionable insight decisions that we can take forward. What I'd like to also welcome is some feedback. This is the first LinkedIn Live session I've ever done. It's the first LinkedIn Live we've done as a Agena group. And your feedback and your to us on whether this has been useful, maybe some topics that you'd like to see us explore in subsequent episodes of this series, would mean the world to me. You know, we're doing this to share, and I'm doing this specifically to kind of share some of the information I've gained over a whole variety of roles that I've carried out. But I really do want to make this as useful and as insightful to as many people as possible. So your feedback would be great. Your suggestion of other topics to cover as we explore this series would also be really welcome. So in closing, I'd really like to thank for your time today. Those people watching this back, please do drop us a comment in LinkedIn. Some feedback again today's sessions would be great. The next session is planned for the 4th of January, same time at 12:30. And I'd really like to explore then how we've used data and insights within our business. We are addicted to data. We run a large parking business where we collect data every day in significant volumes. And I'd really like to just explore how that data is now helping transform our business and transforming the service that we can provide. And I'd really like to welcome as many people as possible on the 4th of January. So please do use the links below to register for us. We'll create the events like we have done for this one. And it would be great for you to also share this within your network, for you to share this with your colleagues and hopefully expand the community of people we can bring into this series of driving insights. So that's the end of our first session. Again, thank you for your time. I'd like to wish everyone the very best of wishes as we come into the festive period, as we move into closing out this year and looking forward to, for us, what we expect to be a very exciting 2024. And I'd hope you've found some value in this session. I'd hope it's making you reflect on how you're using data in your role today, and maybe compelling you to come back to understand how insights can help you transform your service moving forward and help you be more successful in the role that you fulfill today. So thanks again for your time. Please drop those comments back to us on LinkedIn, and really look forward to seeing you in our second session about a data obsessed parking business in our second series.